My mother-in-law said I'm not real family. My son's response left her speechless. It was during dinner. Not a holiday. Not a special occasion. Just a regular Sunday night at my house, where the food was hot, the conversation light, and the tension, as always, hiding under the table like a kicked dog. She said it while reaching for the salt. Of course I'm getting the grandkids something for the reunion photo. But I mean the real family kids. You know. Her voice was casual. The way people say, pass the rolls, or it might rain tomorrow. But the words landed like a slap. I blinked. My fork paused. No one else moved. My husband looked at his plate. His sister shifted uncomfortably. Even my father-in-law cleared his throat and took a long sip of wine. She just kept eating, like she hadn't just drawn a red line through the air, separating me and my son from the rest of the room. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because what was I supposed to say? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point a finger. She didn't even look at me. That was the trick. The performance. The cruelty with clean hands. But before I could say anything, before I could decide whether to challenge her or excuse myself, my son spoke. You mean the kids who came from people you like? His voice was calm. 12 years old. Eyes locked on her across the table. Because if that's what real family means, you probably shouldn't be the one deciding. Silence. Total glass-on-glass silence. My husband looked up, stunned. His sister dropped her fork. My Emile blinked, once, and gave a short, dry laugh. Well, I didn't mean it like that. But no one laughed with her. Not even her husband. My son didn't say another word. He just reached for another biscuit. Like the matter was settled. And in a way, it was. It wasn't the first time. That comment at the table? That wasn't new. It was just the first time someone other than me finally pushed back. The first time she said something like that, I was barely 22, sitting on her floral print couch with a ring on my finger and too much hope in my heart. I had brought a peach cobbler. From scratch. Because I wanted to impress her. She took one bite, then smiled politely. Oh, this is nice. Different. We usually just buy dessert. It seemed harmless. But the air changed. Her daughter smirked. Her husband looked away. I told myself it was nerves. Told myself I was reading too much into things. Told myself that adjusting to in-laws was supposed to be awkward. But that smile, that perfect, tight-lipped, can't-be-quoted smile would become a pattern. When I wore my hair natural, she said. It's so bold. Not everyone could pull that off. When we announced our engagement, she said, marriage is a lot of work, especially when you didn't grow up with examples. When we bought our house, she said, that's wonderful. Though I've always said starter homes should be closer to family. It was never enough to fight over. Never loud enough to call out. But always loud enough. And when our son was born, I thought, maybe, that would change something. That being a grandmother would soften her edges. That seeing her son become a father would make her reach out instead of draw lines. But it only got worse. Subtle. Controlled. Delivered with a smile. Like cruelty served on fine china. He has your nose, but thank God he got our family's temperament. You're not breastfeeding? Well, I guess everyone does things differently now. I'm just glad he has a stable school environment. You know, structure wasn't really your strong suit growing up. And I let it slide. Over and over again. Because I didn't want to be the one to bring conflict into their family. Because I thought it would make my husband's life harder. Because I told myself, just keep the peace. She's not worth the war. But what I didn't realize was that my son had been listening. It didn't happen all at once. The divide wasn't a clean break. It was slow, strategic, the kind of exclusion you can't point to without sounding paranoid. At first, it was little things. A family group text I was never added to. Planning calls I must have missed. A bridal shower where I was asked to help set up, but not invited to give a toast. Every time I asked, she had a reason. Oh, I didn't know you weren't included. I let my daughter handle it. We figured you were busy with work. It was just cousins. You know, blood family. Blood family. That phrase became her shield. Her permission slipped to push me just far enough to the edge that I couldn't complain without looking sensitive. It got worse when the holidays rolled around. We'd walk into her house and there'd be personalized stockings hanging over the fireplace. Everyone's name embroidered in gold. Even the dog had one. Except mine. I got a generic red one with joy in block letters. That first year, I laughed it off. The second year, I told my husband. I'm sure it was a mix-up, he said. I'll ask her. The next year, the same stocking hung there. Same joy. Same message. I stopped saying anything. At Thanksgiving, she passed out place cards. Beautiful ones, hand-lettered, tied to little burlap bundles of cinnamon sticks. Mine said guest. I was 8 years into the family at that point. Married, raising her grandchild, hosting more family dinners than she did. And still, guest. At some point, it became easier to pretend I didn't notice. Because the truth was, the rest of the family noticed. They just didn't say anything. Not my sister-in-law, who had her own tightrope to walk. Not my husband, who loved me but hated conflict. Not her husband, who had long since tuned her out. But someone else noticed too. Someone who was still watching. Still listening. And eventually, he was the one who'd speak up. For a long time, my husband played translator. Not literally, they spoke the same language. But every time she said something sharp, he was there to smooth it over. She didn't mean it that way. You know how she is. It's just old-school thinking. And I let him. Not because I believed the excuses, but because I didn't want to be the wife who dragged him into choosing sides. He didn't see it at first. Not clearly. He saw the tension, sure, but he thought it was about tone, delivery, timing. He didn't see the pattern, the intentional phrasing, the consistent little exclusions, the way she performed kindness when others were watching, and slipped the knife in when they weren't. I'd try to explain it, tell him how her compliments always came with qualifiers. You look nice today. I've always said darker colors are so flattering when you're fuller on top. Or how she'd correct my parenting in front of others, then smile like she was being helpful. You might want to lay off the snacks. Sugar makes him hyper, and I know that's hard for you to manage. He'd wince, apologize later, but still say, I'll talk to her. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't, but nothing ever changed. Because for years his focus was peace, not fairness. He thought that if I stayed quiet, and he stayed neutral, the problem would eventually disappear. It didn't. It calcified. Until one day, I stopped telling him about the comments. Stopped asking him to talk to her. Stopped hoping she'd change. I just took the hits, then smiled through dessert. Let her talk. Let her jab. Let her own the room. I told myself it was easier this way. That I didn't need her acceptance. That her opinion didn't matter. But the truth? It did. It mattered because I was raising her grandson. Because I was part of the family, whether she approved or not. Because I showed up. And I kept showing up. Even when no one stood up for me. Until the day someone finally did. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry on the couch, half listening to my mother-in-law's voice on speakerphone, while my son sat a few feet away doing homework. I didn't think he was paying attention. He had his earbuds in, head down, pencil tapping rhythmically against his workbook. But when I heard her voice sharpen, and her volume rise, I realized I should have stepped outside. I'm just saying, she snapped. If you dressed a little more put together, people might take you more seriously at the school. That office staff is very particular. I didn't answer right away. I'd stopped trying to defend myself months ago. She took my silence as consent. I know it's hard when you didn't grow up with structure, but image matters. And don't get me started on how you let him eat packaged snacks. I glanced toward my son. He wasn't writing anymore. He wasn't looking at his paper. He was staring straight ahead, earbuds removed. Silent. I ended the call as calmly as I could. Said, "We'll talk later." And hit the red button. The room was quiet. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Is that how she always talks to you?" I hesitated. "Sometimes." He nodded slowly. "Does Dad know?" I sat down beside him, trying to choose my words carefully. "Your dad knows she can be harsh. He doesn't always see it the way I do. But he's never heard her say those things like that." My son didn't say anything. He just picked up his pencil again. But from that day forward, something changed. He started watching. Closely. Every interaction between me and his grandmother. Every time she corrected me in public. Every time she brought a separate dessert to make sure there was something the kids actually like. Every time she introduced me to someone as our son's wife. She's very modern. He never said much. Never pushed. But I could tell he was taking notes. And I didn't ask him to. Because I didn't want to poison him. But he wasn't poisoned. He was paying attention. And soon, he would be ready to speak for himself. I did try once. To confront her. To say something. It was 3 years ago. After a holiday brunch where she'd accidentally seated me at the kids' table, saying there weren't enough chairs at the main one. I laughed it off in the moment. Smiled through it. But afterward, in the car, I broke. I cried into my palm like I was 17 again, like I hadn't worked so hard to be the unshakable one. My husband apologized. Said he'd talk to her. But I told him I would. I needed to. I called her 2 days later. Asked her if she had a moment. Of course, sweetheart, she chirped. I told her I was hurt, that I'd felt excluded, that I wasn't sure if it was intentional, but it had happened too many times to feel accidental anymore. She didn't miss a beat. Well, if you're feeling that sensitive, maybe it's something you need to work on. I treat you the way I treat everyone. That was her move. To turn it inward. To make the disrespect my reflection, not her projection. I'm not responsible for how you choose to interpret things, she added. But I do think you should talk to someone. This isn't healthy. And just like that, the entire conversation turned into a diagnosis. She wasn't dismissive. She was concerned. I hung up with more shame than I'd started with. And for weeks afterward, she made comments in front of family. We all need a little therapy now and then, right? I'm just trying to walk on eggshells these days, don't want to be misunderstood. It was a masterclass in weaponized grace. So I stopped trying. No more direct conversations. No more attempts to fix it. No more invitations to clarity. I pulled back quietly. And for a while that worked. Until it didn't. Until someone else in the family, someone younger, quieter, and far more observant, decided enough was enough. It was supposed to be a celebration. Just a backyard birthday party for her youngest granddaughter. Pastel balloons, cupcakes, folding chairs on the lawn. I showed up with my son, both of us holding gifts wrapped in shiny paper and practiced smiles. Emily, my husband's sister, was already there. Her daughter, the birthday girl, was glowing in a rainbow tutu. Her husband was stringing up a banner. And my mother-in-law? She held court near the table, accepting compliments on the decorations like she'd planned it all herself. I placed our gift on the stack and went to greet her. "Oh, you made it," she said, already turning her cheek for a kiss. We made small talk. Nothing pointed. Nothing sharp. Then she reached into a gift bag and pulled out 2 packages. One was wrapped in metallic paper with a big silver bow. She handed it to Emily's daughter. "This one's from Nana," she said proudly. The little girl tore into it, a designer doll with a matching play set. Applause. Squeals. Picture perfect. Then she turned to my son. "And here's a little something for you, sweetheart," she said, digging back into the bag. She handed him a slim, soft envelope. Inside, a $10 gift card. To a gas station convenience store. "You like snacks, right?" she added, smiling. My son nodded politely. He always did. He said thank you, sat down next to me with the envelope, and said nothing. But his eyes didn't lie. He was 13 now, old enough to understand what just happened. Old enough to see the way she beamed at one grandchild and offered scraps to another, and made sure everyone saw it. I kept my mouth shut, because I wasn't going to cause a scene, because my husband was helping set up the cake, because the last time I confronted her, I was branded the problem. But later that night, in the car, I glanced over at him. He was quiet. Too quiet. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. Then after a beat, he added, "I don't think Grandma likes you very much." My hands tightened on the wheel. "That's complicated," I said carefully. "No," he replied. "It's not." He didn't say anything else. Didn't need to, because that was the moment I knew. He wasn't just watching. He was remembering. And soon he'd decide when to speak. On his terms. In his time. And when he did, she wouldn't see it coming. Something changed after that party. He didn't say anything to me about it again. Didn't complain. Didn't sulk. But his silence. It wasn't passive. It was deliberate. He stopped saying thank you to her when it wasn't earned. Stopped volunteering to go to her house when she invited the cousins over. Stopped pretending not to notice when she said things like, "Well, you know Emily's daughter, she's just so advanced for her age." He just observed. Sat through her comments with eyes that didn't blink. Did his homework on the couch while she made backhanded remarks in the kitchen. Watched how she treated me like a seasonal employee in her family business. And when we got in the car afterward, he didn't vent. He just said, "I don't think I want to go next time." And I didn't push him. I didn't say, "But it's family." Because for once, someone else had used that word the way I always wanted to. Not as an obligation, but as a boundary. He started sticking closer to me at events. Sitting next to me at dinners. Asking if I wanted help clearing plates, just loud enough for her to hear. Once, when she tried to correct him for putting too much ketchup on his burger, he said, "My mom says it's fine. I think I'll listen to her." I nearly dropped the spatula. He wasn't being disrespectful. He was being clear. And I could tell it rattled her. Because she started trying harder. Suddenly I was so organized. She brought a store-bought pie to dinner and called it my favorite. She sent my son a hoodie, 2 sizes too small, and included a note that said, "Oops, still figuring out your sizes, it's all moving so fast." But it was too late. He'd already seen her. And more importantly, he'd already chosen me. It felt familiar. The table. The soft clinking of silverware. The forced laughter around a roast that had been slightly overcooked. Another Sunday dinner. Emily was there. Her husband too. The cousins were at the kids' table. My husband sat beside me, tapping his fingers lightly on the tablecloth. Nervous habit. And my mother-in-law? She was performing, as usual. Smiling. Holding court. Controlling the conversation with sugar-coated superiority. I was carving the ham when she said it. Softly. Barely above the sound of the clink-and-pass rhythm. Of course, the family photo is just for the originals. You know, bloodline. Real family. She said it without looking up. Like it didn't matter. Like it wasn't a line meant to cut. My hand tightened around the knife. I didn't speak. Because I'd already learned that my silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint. But my son? He looked up from his plate. Voice calm. Clear. Steady. That's not what real family means. The whole table paused. Even my husband turned to him. My mother-in-law blinked. Excuse me. He didn't flinch. Real family shows up. Real family defends you. Real family doesn't treat you like an outsider in your own house. Emily's fork froze midair. The cousins went quiet. He kept going. Real family is the person who takes care of you when you're sick. Who makes your school lunches. Who shows up to your games, even when you don't play. That's my mom. My husband's eyes welled up. My hand dropped the knife gently onto the cutting board. My mother-in-law opened her mouth. Closed it. Well, I didn't mean. He cut her off. Not rudely. Just decisively. I know what you meant. But I've been listening for years. And I think you've forgotten what real family looks like. He pushed his chair back. Walked out of the dining room. The silence he left behind spoke louder than any roast, any prayer, any toast she'd ever given. And she knew it. No one followed him. Not right away. He walked calmly down the hall, turned the corner, and disappeared into the guest room where his backpack was, leaving the rest of us sitting there, stunned. You could hear the tick of the dining room clock. My mother-in-law sat rigid in her seat, one hand still curled around her wine glass. Her mouth was slightly open, like a reply had started forming, then vanished halfway through. But this time, no one came to her rescue. Not my husband. Not Emily. Not her husband. Not even the cousins who normally laughed at everything she said out of habit. She looked around the table like she was waiting for someone to validate her. To say he's just a kid. Or he didn't mean it like that. But the room had shifted. Everyone had heard what he said. And the thing is, once truth is spoken plainly, you can't pretend it didn't land. She tried to chuckle. Teenagers, right? Always so dramatic. Still no response. Her husband, bless him, took a long drink of water and said, "Well, I think he made his point." Even Emily, who usually filled every silence, stayed quiet. The silence wasn't awkward. It was clarity. Years of little digs, of backhanded remarks, of weaponized etiquette. And her own grandson had cracked the surface in a single breath. She finally turned to me. I didn't mean to offend. I stopped her with the gentlest thing I could offer. You don't have to explain. He heard you. That's the part you never saw coming. And maybe that was what stung most. Not just that he spoke up, but that he knew. He saw me. He chose me. And he said what no adult had ever had the courage to say out loud. Enough. She didn't come to the next dinner. No explanation. No apology. Just a polite message in the family group chat. We'll sit this one out. Sounds like a full house anyway, smiling face with smiling eyes. For someone who used to host everything, organize everything, control everything. That message said more than she meant it to. She was pulling back. Not because she was sorry, but because she didn't know how to operate without being in control. My husband saw it too. That night, after we got home, he pulled me aside. I should have said something a long time ago, he told me. I thought keeping the peace meant avoiding the fight. But I see now, it meant leaving you in it alone. It was the first time he'd ever said that. Not, I'll talk to her. Not, she didn't mean it. Not, she's just old-fashioned. Just, you were right. And I should have stood with you sooner. He apologized. Not with flowers. Not with some big gesture. But with presence. With ownership. And I could feel the weight between us start to dissolve. The one I'd been carrying while trying to hold our family together in silence. From then on, things changed. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But meaningfully. He stopped brushing things off. Stopped trying to keep her happy at my expense. Started responding to microaggressions in real time, with words like, "Actually, that's not true. That was out of line. We're not doing that." And the more he spoke up, the less she tried. She still sends cards. Still posts throwback photos of the grandkids, though mine shows up less frequently now. And when she does speak, it's measured. Careful, like she's finally realized. I may not be her idea of real family, but I raised the one person in this house who sees through her completely. And after all these years, that was more validation than I ever needed. It was late on a school night. The house was quiet. Dishes washed, lights dimmed, laundry folded. I was sitting at the kitchen table finishing an email when my son wandered in, rubbing his eyes and mumbling something about forgetting his water bottle in his backpack. I nodded toward the hallway. "Check the mudroom. It's probably there." He shuffled off, then came back with the bottle and sat across from me. Didn't say anything. Just sat there for a moment, chin resting in his palm. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Just thinking." I smiled gently. "About?" He shrugged. Then after a pause, "I meant what I said. At dinner. I'm not sorry." I swallowed. Something caught in my throat, soft but sharp. "I know," I said. He looked me straight in the eye. "You didn't deserve that. Any of it." His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. Simple. Solid. Clear. "I've watched how you let stuff go just to keep things calm. I used to think that was weakness. But now I think it's strength." I blinked fast. Looked away. Because if I looked at him too long, the tears would come too quick. He didn't stop there. "I don't care what Grandma thinks is real family. I know who shows up. I know who holds things together. It's always been you." The tears came anyway. But they were quiet. Soft. A release. "Thank you," I whispered. He stood. Walked over. Hugged me tight. The kind of hug you don't get often once they start growing into themselves. The kind you cherish for the rest of your life. And then he pulled back just enough to say, "I see you. Not as a mom. Not as a wife. Not as a role. But as a person. A woman who spent too many years being silenced, then blamed for not speaking up sooner. And now, I didn't have to explain myself. Didn't have to prove anything. Didn't have to fight to be seen. Because he already did."
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.